So what you're looking at here is the city Skyline City that I've spent the past almost 2 years that I've spent playing this game making. My intention was to base it off of cities found throughout the Great Lakes and Midwest regions of the US. On the screen I'll put a list of all the cities that I have taken specific inspiration from, although the major ones I would say are Grand Rapids and Detroit, Michigan, and Cleveland, Ohio. I posted a picture with its completion onto the City Skylines subreddit where it was pretty positively received. So, and I thought the idea of making a tour video. So I figured now might as well be a good time to go ahead and make that. Just kind of going through the city, pointing out specific areas of inspiration. So I hope you enjoy. So coming in from the east here, first thing I want to point out is that the original map basically had two freeways, one that runs from the east to the west and one that runs north-south. Those for the most part are pretty much untouched, so especially over in this end of the map that I never really built up. Things like this retaining wall, the original to the first part we come across here is the airport, which is probably the most recent major area that I've done, just because with the new airports DLC wanted to build a new one. This spot in the original map first off was a lot smaller and also hillier, and then this highway was also widened by me in order to make room for the airport. The airport itself isn't really based on any of the cities that I drew inspiration from for this build. It's just more of a standard the room, and I put what I needed there. So then coming along here, we reach this small little town over here. Originally it was meant to be a satellite town, but it's kind of grown into the sprawl, which is pretty organic, so I'm kind of happy with that ended up turning out. This one in particular is based on Big Rapids, Michigan. Not really specifically with the road layouts, but it's more inspired by. Coming along here, you see some more hilly suburbs, respecting the terrain. This more bougie one up here on the hill, still having the occasional office or school space. Come along here, as you follow the highway and in between the mountain, kind of get a little grid pattern going as you're approaching the more concentrated sprawl. So this road here, Millermore Boulevard, we'll come to that name in a second, but this part over here where it reaches the edge of the city and widens out, and then kind of passes this little thing here, which more is than isn't, is based on some of the crazy things they got going in Appalachia, I've noticed, with freeway interchanges tucked into mountains. But yeah, not necessarily a freeway, but more of an expressway that's fairly common in more rural areas around the region. I specifically mention Indiana just because, to me at least, that state seems to have more than any other, but they can be found pretty much everywhere. So this part right here, this is pretty interesting. So you notice to one side of this highway I got this major industrial area with some of the industry's DLC, unique factories, and then on the other side this shopping area, Target, Costco, a restaurant. So this is inspired, doesn't look anything like this in real life, but it's inspired by Steelyard Commons, which is a shopping area just south of downtown Cleveland. And that have a similar setup where there's a huge shopping area with a bunch of larger box stores. And then basically behind the shopping center in that case, there is a huge steel mill. So kind of incorporating that basis here. You'll see here Kokomo Avenue, the first major urban thoroughfare we're coming across. I took after the pattern of naming a lot of the major thoroughfares after cities that this build is based on. So Kokomo Avenue right there, kind of tall bridge across the creek, across the highway, then in here, and then that leads in through this big intersection into the airport, the old airport region, just before it was replaced by the new DLC one. So still used, just not as much. And you'll see this, I use this a lot, these Michigan left roads. Now with the median, so if you're unfamiliar with that, essentially what happens is instead of, say, like what we saw over here with a Boulevard Boulevard, where a car coming in from this way would go through the median and turn left, in order to reduce traffic accidents and the like, what would happen is if you want to turn left was you actually come in on the right, turn right, and then perform a U-turn here. And then it goes through the intersection again. A bit more time consuming and kind of confusing if you haven't done them before, but I really like them and just the whole concept behind them, so I threw them in a lot wherever I could. So then coming back here over some more suburbs. Another satellite town that I founded a little bit on its own as the sprawl was crawling up, and then it, surrounded by it. Again, pretty organic for growth and that kind of thing. But I suppose now would be a good time to talk about the name thing I mentioned. So when I was laying down this part of Miller Moore Boulevard that uses the Michigan left setup I just mentioned, the auto-generated names for the roads were Miller and Moore Street. So I figured because it's fairly common for a lot of towns across the Great Lakes region to have a pretty ore-centric mining history, particularly with iron ore. So I figured it would make sense, kind of ore-wise, to have a large mine with that kind of name and then incorporate that all over this area. So that's where this town comes from. Not exactly like a top-tier world building, but just a little bit of lore. So this part right here, this is kind of interesting. I never really I didn't base it on anything in real life per se. It's just because I saw the opportunity and I ran with it. So what happens here with the St. Louis Avenue as it's coming through, the terrain and just its location, I didn't really want to have a at intersection because we already had one here. There's another major one here. I guess that one wouldn't have really interfered with it. So what I did, and this does happen a lot with the major thoroughfares, you'll sometimes have roads that just cross it. That's the side streets that have to do the actual intersecting. So instead I had Water Buffalo Street here, which I gave it a custom name. It's a song reference, but I gave it a custom name going because it's not a arterial road per se, but it's still more used than a side street. But anyway, so I just thought it'd be a good opportunity to experiment with a rather odd traffic layout given the road that it's intersecting. So I went ahead, it turned right through a fair, it splits there, triangle, coming in, turn left, go through, and then go right through. Just really kind of kooky stuff. I guess that's what this game's for. You also notice here, most of these zone buildings, they aren't attached to Millermore Boulevard. Some of them aren't. Again, that's pretty realistic for a road this size. It's meant to be more of a thoroughfare than an actual a local road. So here, Keter Avenue, which is basically the main north-south avenue. So it's kind of funny because the name comes from a little in-joke I had. So particularly in Cleveland, with the main cities this build was based off of, but also I've noticed in a bunch of cities around the region, they have roads named Euclid Avenue. And so because I'm decent fan of the SCP Wiki, I thought it would be kind of a joke because the Euclid and Keter are both different containment classes there. So, just a little thing there. So this part here, again, not really directly based off of anything with the IKEA. However, its location next to the freeway is inspired by the one in Canton, Michigan, a suburb of Detroit. Another thing based on Detroit's urban planning, so you'll notice coming over here, mostly residential neighborhoods, and then suddenly two big industrial parks with the oil industry area and then all this stuff. So that was kind of something weird I noticed very early on with my research into Midwest urban design, is that I haven't really seen it in use in as many places as often in other cities as it is in Detroit. But I was basically just going along Google Earth, and it's just residential neighborhoods, spanning out forever, and then suddenly just this huge automotive factory complex. So I kind of brought that in here with the with this major industrial area. Coming along here, you can see Keter Avenue. See how City Skylines doesn't really like these kinds of modded roads, the little bumps and the set crosswalks. So this museum here, the art museum, again, I say that a lot, not directly based on anything in particular. However, its location with the road that kind of comes along here is partially inspired by the location of the Cleveland Museum of Natural History. Also with the adjacent parking garage. Again, just little based on places I've been and also seen online. Groverburg City Zoo. So this here, with its location next to with its location near the downtown area next to the freeway, that's pretty inspired by the Indian City Zoo, which is also relatively close to downtown for the amount of land it takes up. Coming across here, you see train tracks cutting through kind of like a river. More on that in a bit. So this thing here, where it's like the city office and then the one-way roads going around with the parking in it, that's inspired by Kokomo. The name of the county escapes me, but the county courthouse in Kokomo, Indiana, has a similar setup where it's this one-way road that goes around the square and angled parking on the inside. So then over here, major university, campus DLC. So this, it's not as close as this one is, you know, right abuts the freeway. But in my mind, at least, when I was creating this, the positioning of this football stadium, where it's like visible along the highway, was inspired by the positioning of Ohio State's football stadium in Columbus, Ohio. So then continuing along, suburban highway. So this intersection here, this intersection here, where Pittsburgh Avenue and then Washington Street, which is just an auto-generated name, it's basically a mirrored version of it's based on a bit of a crazy intersection in Grand Rapids, Michigan, where at the northern end of Beltline Avenue. That doesn't exactly look like more of a curve with the road that comes in from the side, but still pretty much the main overarching design is invoked there. So you'll probably notice the terrain doesn't really look like this kind of this extreme of hilliness isn't really anywhere in the Great Lakes region that I was drawing inspiration from. So in retrospect, this map probably wasn't the best choice, despite how well built it is. Probably just not the best for what I was going for. But that still that didn't stop me. So a lot of the way these hilly grids are laid out is almost exclusively inspired by Cincinnati, which is which, if you're unfamiliar with, there's basically the downtown flatter area along the river, and then surrounding it there's hills and stuff with all the neighborhoods out or suburbs because it's in the river valley. So then comes along here some uptown skyscrapers. Again, fairly common trope, relatively speaking, in the urban design of the cities I was basing it off of. So this part's interesting. So on the actual map, if I remember it correctly, this intersection, with the freeway, is with the map, and then it's just the vanilla 2 lanes to each side with the median avenues. And then, so this jug handle here, this one is included with the intersection. However, this one here, so what happened was there was an insane amount of traffic coming in northbound on Keter Avenue across this bridge and trying to turn left. So I spoke to something that you see sometimes in the cities I'm basing this off of, where there's a high capacity left turn, and they'll basically just jug handle it into 2 separate intersections that are separate from the main thoroughfare. I couldn't simulate it fully because, as you'll see here, the with the lane arrows, the game thinks that these are going straight, so I couldn't have this at a continuously right turn, but I still think it works for the most part regardless. So then that leads us right here to downtown Groverburg. there wasn't like a single specific city that I based it off of. Rather, the downtown area was largely an amalgamation of all of them. You'll see some of the buildings here from the Steam Workshop from the cities I based it off of. You got One Detroit Center, Dime Bank, both from Detroit, PPG Place and the Highmark Center from Pittsburgh, Dirksen Federal Building from Chicago, Kansas City Power and Light Building. This one's from France, but you know, they get in the club. A couple interesting things to note here. So first thing, you'll notice one of the roads I named Lakeshore Drive. That was another very common road name I discovered across almost all the cities that I was basing off. Not almost all, but a noticeable amount of the cities is that there's a Lakeshore Drive in a lot of them. So of course, because it drives along the lakeshore for part of it, I gotta include it somewhere. And then an area that's specifically inspired by somewhere in one of the cities is this little convention center here being on the water. That's largely inspired by the George R. Brown Convention Center in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which sits along the shore of the Allegheny River. If I pronounced that right. It's along the shore of the river. So kind of bringing that in. Notice probably is that the grids here right downtown are they're very haphazard, like splitting off at random angles. That's inspired by Cleveland, like specifically Cleveland, because if you look at Cleveland online, like the maps, the grid at least immediately down is sporadic and the angles slightly deviate at random intervals. So I just brought that in here because it is organically like older part of the city. So kind of bringing that in here. You'll see here Central Station area, another European inspiration, but sneaking its way in. So this little like phenomenon here I touched on earlier, where it's the river, I called it, tracks physically separates parts of the city. That's another common phenomenon, especially with the more industrial sides of the cities that I'm basing it on. If I could label one part, it'd probably be Cincinnati, where just northwest of the downtown area, there's a very large rail yard that has causeways, like road causeways going over it. So, but overall, it's a more just general phenomenon that's a symptom of the design. One quick thing over here, another inspiration that deviates a little from the original, but is still there. So this one here is just based on the quirky highway exit that I found in downtown St. Louis, so I brought that in. Coming over here to the port. Not really specifically based on any port in any cities. It's just kind of there, just kind of following the general rules with the grids, lots of railways. Falcon 9 booster because I felt like it, and absolutely makes no sense. But making sure this is where this part is where I keep the trolleybus depot that serves the downtown area. A little bit of a cruise ship terminal. And you got this little truss bridge here coming across. The Metro Bridge, that's my addition, because I first started building this when Sunset Harbor came out, so you had all the new Metro stuff I had to play with. But this is actually original to the map. I just want to point it out because I think it's really cool with how they brought in this lift bridge design, which lift bridges are like super common drawbridge types for the region. So I kept it because I thought it fit super well, where they bring in the highway bridge pylons to make it look like the lift towers. But again, not my creation. That came with the map from Steam. So then we come along here, Cheney Avenue, because I ran out of cities to name the thoroughfares for. Train tracks, metro tracks, freeway. Kind of bringing in very short merging distances, which is actually a thing, much to my frustration. Trumpet interchange going on for another major Michigan left thoroughfare. So this area right here, this is actually with the fairgrounds and stuff, is based on a specific part of Cleveland that I once while I was visiting. So you got like the hotel coming up, which is right next to the freeway. There was like a abandoned restaurant here, like more hotels right here in this area. And then the fairgrounds were actually like just over here, the Cuyahoga County Fairgrounds, but still keeping that kind of idea intact, where they're like a decent distance out of the city, but still, you know, within the sprawl. Something else to point out here, not necessarily a basis, but looking at these the two parallel streets along this portion of the east-west freeway, Pearl and Ionia streets. They don't run parallel in real life, but they're named after two streets in Grand Rapids. Again, just a quick reference more than an actual basis. So this suburb area over here, more of the same, where it's just kind of bringing in the more organically grown town center, and then gets absorbed by the larger sprawl. I named it Northfield, just as a play, because it's to the north of town, at the play on Southfield, which is another decent-sized suburb of Detroit. It's actually mostly to the west of Detroit, so... So come along here, get some farmland going in the more, like, you know, that'd be harder to tame, I guess would be a good word. Harder to tame area. So this grid here, figured it would be a good time to notice, this grid is actually measured out to be pretty much based on 1 mile increments, or like half mile in most cases. So that is a fairly common thing all over the Great Lakes region, just due to the way as far as like an ordinance, as the territory was first getting organized into statehood, where basically the land was divided into 1 square mile segments. It's kind of an interesting history read, but just really bringing in the heritage of the area that I was talking about. And then here you'll see with where it's just the regular median turns, again, more of that Indiana type highway situation. So then across the river here, no outlet, but still pretty gritty. Automotive factory, of course, gotta have one. You'll see Lake Boulevard, which is another major there with the Michigan lefts. Probably be a good here to bring up, because with how I make them. So essentially, after I drag the roads through and build them, I go in with the traffic manager, and then just connect them with straight lines to ensure that they can't turn left. Half of that's taken care of pretty easily with the fact that they are one-way streets, half of the roads. So, but just making sure that there aren't any left turns, and then I go in with the, not next anymore, but like next inspired one-way roads. I drag them across, and then using Move It, I then bring them back. I disable most of these crosswalks, but I do use them as a guide, because they kind of snap at a weird angle until you drag it far enough, and then it's flat. So I use that as a guide, kind of judging what angle to put them at. This crazy roundabout, which I know I've shared in the City Skylines community recently, not really based on anything. It was just because it was crazy and the traffic here was already bad. So I figured I couldn't make it worse. So I figured it'd be a great opportunity to experiment with a odd design of a 2-way traffic light controlled roundabout with a jug handle in the middle, which also kind of helps feed, because a bunch of bus lines come through here and then serve a bus station across from the train station. So this little bit here, it's the taller buildings along the freeway. That's another bit taken from Southfield, which has another similar, like, large collection of office buildings, relatively large for the area, like tall office buildings along 2 freeways. Actually, they're running parallel. It's kind of funky, but also pretty cool. Then it comes along, got more industrial areas, suburbs kind of fan out. This intersection here, in all its crazy glory, not mine. It's taken from the Steam Workshop after I saw it on the City Skylines subreddit. I'm forgetting your name, but kudos to whoever made it. Just kind of just kind of spicing it up. Again, definitely not based on anything in real life, I can tell you that. However, there are definitely some intersections in these cities that I think are questionable. I'm just looking at my notes. So these little commercial areas here, as with the as I'm talking about with the suburbs, and as they, as they progress, getting more and more less dense, what happens is the commercial areas start to cluster together. So I brought that into my city, getting some like a hypermarket, strip mall, just keeping them isolated because they got plenty of land. And then I got the shopping mall over here, which is made with Leno assets. There's not really a specific mall that I did when I was putting it together. Just kind of basing it off of all the malls I've been to in the region. If there were a couple I'd have to point out, it'd probably be the Woodland Mall in Grand Rapids, mostly just for the cheesecake factory sitting next to it. And then also the Lansing Mall with kind of the layout to the main entrance. And then again, water features, other shops outside. This high school campus, not based on anything in real life, but its location being next to the shopping mall was inspired by the Granville High School, Granville, Michigan High School, which is next to a large shopping mall, that being a suburb of Grand Rapids. Make a quick jog down here, down Cheney Avenue again, where it intersects Lake Boulevard. So this intersection here, I was offered this opportunity by the terrain, and I'd seen the intersection that's based on before, so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to use it here. So basically, because it would have been really funky to get a at-grade intersection here with this kind of hill, I decided to base this off of the intersection with M1, that's Michigan State Highway 1, Woodward Avenue, and 8 Mile in Detroit, or at the city limits of Detroit. So those basically do follow this same procedure where one road goes, its thoroughfare goes through the bottom, the other road's thoroughfare goes through the top, and then it has these side roads that split off at an angle, and those are the ones that intersect in this kind of square, at terrain level thing. So, and yes, there are buildings that go pretty much right up to the intersection too, so, pretty odd. But I kind of dig it. So then over here, dunes are, relatively common along these lake shores. The two that pop in my mind are Traverse City National Lake Shore, and then the Indiana Dunes recently upgraded national park. Both, so just kind of bringing that in here. Doesn't really look like a dune per se, but just having that sand, natural area. Not based on anything. I just like Bauhaus, so I put that in. So we come along here, little, more wealthy area along this little peninsula. Kind of forms a natural harbor at the outlet of this river. Another isolated industrial area. Or I say isolated as in it's contained, in its own little thing. Coming along here, traffic jams that are ignored just like in real life. Yeah, keep it realistic, So this part here, the Guy Yasuda, which is named a little historical reference off of the guy that Pontiac was named after, is based off of Pontiac, another Detroit suburb. Primarily here, so you see Cheney Avenue comes in, and then it splits into these two one-way roads, which I believe they actually just got rid of in Pontiac, which kind of blows because I thought they were cool. But where it splits off into the two one-way roads that fan out into turn to these bold little things that surround the central business district. So then we come over here, much more grid-based layout. This thing with the where it's kind of this huge feels like wasted space with the large pylons. That's another thing that I saw while looking at Detroit's planning. I wasn't planning on Detroit on such a big basis. It just kind of ended up being that way. I know there were things that I was taking from it from the start. I just wasn't expecting so much. For instance, so you see Columbus Avenue over here, where it's just lots of lanes, turning lane in the middle, nothing except commercial that actually abuts it. That's based on M3, which is another main arterial avenue of Detroit. I believe it's actually called Pontiac Avenue, which is a little confusing because I had a Pontiac Avenue over there. But so yeah, that basis. Bringing in here, you see more Michigan Left Boulevard. So this little campus over here with the hospital stuff, this is here is inspired by mostly by the Mun yeah, the Munson Health Center in Traverse City, Michigan. Uh, it is mostly like one main building. It's not like split in two like this one is, but that's just more of the limitations of the game. But you'll see here, it's got like, the roads that, run normally and then basically terminate at the hospital campus. It's got the roads that run alongside it. Not directly based, but still inspired. So then West Groverburg, which is like the main, like the second city, not as big as downtown Groverburg, but like the main suburb, I guess. You'll see tall resort buildings, which is another thing in like Chicago, Milwaukee, even Cleveland, where you're just along the lakeshore because it's along the water. But you do have a couple taller buildings that pop up that are mostly resorts. Little more healthy suburb. Maybe not the best view with the dirt there. But I suppose since we're crossing the bay, now would be a good time to bring up the bridges. I cross it. Yeah, gotta go to bridges. So, just a little bit here. Like I said, it was original. The original with the map was basically this. Like this part's original to the map, where it was just the highway ramp roads crossing, and the creator had used Move It to put them onto a single pylon. When I converted it to a larger highway when I was building this airport, I kind of honored that by just making their own suspension bridges. So that's like kinda original, but not really. This is fully original to the map. I just figured I'd point it out because it's another thing that I think resonates with the region that I was going with. Not necessarily at grade, but I really like the Chicago Skyway, which is, I want to say I-94, coming in from the south of Detroit, south of Chicago, where it's a huge, like $7 a trip toll. But it is this super tall, really neat looking steel girder bridge. Keter Avenue bridge. That one I basically built myself. And then they got the Fox Point Road Bridge, which leads us to Fox Point. So Fox Point here, two names. The name is mine, like I came up with it. Because the map shape here, I thought it looked like Fox kinda. So. And then also because I was building a resort here whose position on a peninsula, like exclusively on a peninsula, is inspired by Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio, which is along Lake Erie between Toledo and Cleveland. And yet another Cleveland basis here is with this lakeshore with the cliff. It's mostly residential, like fancier houses that abut the cliff, and then there's also like larger like campuses, like this library here. Again, just more of the same here, just based in general on a lot of urban design practices in the region. Enclosed things, so it looks like it is actually subdivided land. Got logging stuff up here in the more like harder to build areas. And I guess one more thing to point out here, just this little quaint Lakeside Drive helps point out a little quieter spot. And I just kind of like it, so it's not all like super dense building. And thus that concludes the tour of Groverburg.